Hello, hello, hello. Good evening if you're joining us live. Good morning, good afternoon, just depending on when you watch, whether you're catching it in real time or watching on the replay. Welcome to this evening's edition of Live Well Sister. I am your host, Marcie Thomas, and also the founder of Brown Girl Collective, where we believe in celebrating Black women who are bold, brilliant, and beautiful 365 days a year. So come on in the room and join us. And if you don't mind, drop in the comments, let us know where you're joining us from. And I'm super, super excited about the conversation we're going to have tonight. Because as you may or may not know, the concept of Live Well Sister is to talk about several areas in which it's good for us to live our best lives. One would be spiritually, another would be just personal and our self-care. The third is our relationships. The fourth is our career and our purpose, which tonight is going to tap into that somewhat. And after that would be our finances, and then our service to community, which tonight is also going to touch on that. And last but not least, the ways in which we have joy and have fun in our lives. So I'm super excited to be able to bring our wonderful guest on who's going to help us discover another way, not only for us to live well, but also be inspired by young women who are living well and learning and teaching us at the same time. So without any further delay, I want to go ahead and introduce our speaker for the evening. We have Khristi Lauren Adams, who is a speaker, author, youth advocate, and ordained Baptist minister. She is the author of Parable of the Brown Girl, which I have here, have a copy of that as well, which highlights the cultural and spiritual truths that emerge from the lives of young Black girls. Parable of the Black Girl has received awards for Best Young Adult Book from the African American Literary Awards and the New York Black Librarians Caucus. Her current book, Unbossed, How Black Girls Are Leading the Way, well, actually, it's current out next month, put it that way. It's something that we're going to talk about tonight, and how several brilliant Black girls are leading the way for us. And it is available in the adult version, which I have here, and it will also be available for your young girls in middle grades. Outside of all the time that Khristi spends writing, she also works as a dean of spiritual life and equity at the Hill School, where she is also an instructor of religious studies. She is the founder and director of the Becoming Conference, an annual conference and leadership cohort designed to empower, educate, and inspire girls between the ages of 13 and 18. And she also sits on the advisory board for Word Made Flesh, a nonprofit organization existing to serve among the most vulnerable of the world's poor. So as you can see, this busy lady has a lot going on, and she's definitely committed to girls, the community, and all of us. So without any further delay, welcome to the room, Khristi Lauren Adams.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Oh, absolutely. I was so excited when your team reached out, because I'm like, oh, I know who that is. I already have her first book.
Like I said, my first love.
Yeah, it's your first baby. So welcome. I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to come here and talk to us about the work that you have going on.
Thank you. Can't wait to talk about the girls and
oh yeah, absolutely.
My joy.
Absolutely. So just for obviously the book isn't out yet. So just to give us a little overview of what the book is actually about. So what can we expect?
Yes. So Unbossed, How Black Girls Are Leading the Way. And you can sort of see in the top, I don't know if it's to my right, but maybe to your left, you see some of the middle grade version as well. Both books highlight and center 8 young Black women. They're not as much girls anymore. I'll tell you a little bit later, I did an Instagram live with one on Sunday, and she was 15 when I first interviewed her, but she's 17 and a half now. So she's very, very clear that it's half 17.
Yeah, remember when we used to do that?
Right. So they are young women. They are not girls anymore. But they very much are to us, and it's about their lives and their leadership in different areas. I consider them activists, but they are activists in different realms. So they're not just racial justice advocates, but also climate justice activists, literacy, mental health advocacy. So these are girls who are making a mark. They're making a mark nationally, but for the most part in their spheres of influence. So whether it's their local community, their state, our environmental justice activist, she's focused and centered mainly her work in Maine, but they all want to branch out. And I talk about these girls in each of the chapters, the organizations or just how they lead, but then also their particular leadership style. So I did 1 year PhD, a PhD program for 1 year in leadership studies and in organizational leadership. I didn't think I was going to ever do anything with that again when I left the program. I was too theological for the program, which is basically what they said. They didn't do anything. It was just more like, you think pretty theological, right? Which I couldn't help because I went to seminary. Right. But I couldn't really picture myself devoting however many more years of my life to that. But when I was doing that program, I remember most of the leadership studies was by white men. For the most part, written by white men. And they're trying to get leadership studies to be more, taken more seriously in the academy. Anyway, so I tie each girl to a particular leadership theory that I learned and then in the program, but then also that I wound up researching and studying for this book and saying this girl has this particular leadership style. And it's not just, she's just a leader. She is this intentionally specific type of leader, and we can study that type. We've seen these types of leaders before, whether it's men or white men, black, whatever it might be. But I also add in there that Black women that came before us have been reflecting these leadership styles for generations. And then each chapter ends with some of the wisdom that I learned from each girl, if they had advice or something that I took away.
Yes, and as I mentioned to you, I call it the Brown Room since this is Brown Girl Collective. Yeah. That, what I really enjoyed about reading the book and just the individual stories as well is that, being a person who works in a corporate environment in my day job and, having experiences with everyone that's considered a leader, at least in my current position, that everyone is really in a leadership position is a white male, high level leadership. And having an event where there were all these quotes and things about how to be a leader that we had last year, and everything was a quote by a white man, not even no women of any race. But all white men. And it's like, wow, what about all of the great leaders, besides Dr. Martin Luther King, because they like to throw him in every now and then. Like he's the only one, but it's like, wow, so just thinking for myself, that's disheartening, to not see myself reflected. And I can imagine even more so, for like the young girl who's coming up, if she's studying and wanting, perhaps studying and wanting to become a leader and looking, to, quote unquote, mainstream, she's not going to find herself reflected. So I really love the fact that, you created this book so that we can not only see what's happening in the here and now, but also be able to tap into some of the great leaders from the past who may not have, led in quote unquote traditional ways, but they were still leaders.
Right. Yeah, that was also, it was something I've always known, but there were names out there, particularly Black women. I remember watching King in the Wilderness, and it was a documentary about Martin Luther King on HBO. And just for some reason, when I watched that documentary, I remember seeing the women around him and saying like, wow, they were really, and they're still, some of them still around today, they were really out there doing the work. It's the things that in the back of your head, it's like subliminal, but the focus was so much always on these particular types of individuals. And I'm like, why aren't we studying them? So.
Absolutely. Well, just kind of as a teaser, you have a little piece that you'd like to share with us from the book so we can know what we're going to be, what we are in store, what's in store for us.
Yes, I let me see if I want to do the intro or the conclusion. I think I want to do a conclusion. Part of it at least, not the whole thing. So, quote: if they don't give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair. Unquote. Presidential candidate Shirley Chisholm once said. In some ways, that's what the young Black women featured in this book are doing, bringing their own folding chairs. The girls whose stories and leadership were shared here all have unique experiences, vary in age, and come from different backgrounds. What they share is their sheer will, desire, and passion to turn unfortunate circumstances into something hopeful. They use their influence and platforms to create and sustain social change and bring awareness to injustice. They use their God given gifts to make the world a better place. Because of them, I am more hopeful. I am hopeful because somewhere in the smallest state in the country, there is a girl wanting to make the world a better place, and she is starting with the people right in her tiny community. I am hopeful because a 7-year-old girl who got a life altering diagnosis decided to start an organization to put a smile on the faces of other kids to let them know they are not forgotten. I am hopeful because young girls across the country are marching for their rights and voices to be heard and taken seriously. Along with these young women are countless Black girls leading the way in our nation and in this world. There's Marley Diaz, the creator and founder of hashtag 1000 Black Girls Books, an international movement to collect and donate children's books that feature girls as the leader. There is Najai Graham Henrys, the world's youngest female barber. At only 9 years old, she spends her time giving free haircuts to those in need. There is Michaela Ulmer, who founded Me and the Bees Lemonade when she was just 10. Within 2 short years, the lemonade was being sold in more than 500 stores at the rate of 500,000 bottles a year. She donates a percentage of the profits to local and international organizations working to save honeybees. These girls are human, and they have experienced life's joys and challenges just like anyone else. Yet their resilience and their imagination have compelled them to lead the way. They all give me hope for our future.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. Yes, I mean, yes. As I was reading, I thought about Marley, especially with the young lady who founded Brown Kids Read.
Oh, yes. I'd love to figure out how they can get connected.
Oh, yes. Well, actually, I know the mom, so.
Okay, yeah, I'd love to. I think Sonya would love that. I don't think she's connected to her, and she's in Jersey. Sonya's in Jersey, and I believe Marley's in New Jersey too.
She is. Mm-hmm. So we'll hook that up.
Oh yeah, that's
So, but yes, one of the things I really loved, and we can get into some of the stories here in a second, but the other thing I thought about with each one of these girls, they all had different things that were going on in their lives that led them to a space of deciding that they wanted change. They wanted to do something different. And they, I like the fact that their leadership was not stifled, because sometimes, our leadership can be stifled, or, sit down, be quiet. Girls shouldn't do, whatever this is.
Right.
A lot of times we get those messages, and just the support that they got from their families in general. Yeah. None of them could have done it without the support.
Right. Yeah. I definitely noticed that. There were, there were girls that, the mental health piece with Hannah, and there's one of the chapters is a girl who had a moment of suicidal ideation, where sort of coming out of that moment, she felt like there may be other young people in a very similar situation as me, feeling like they don't have the support or that they have nowhere to turn. And so they should end their lives. She took that and sort of created the Not Okay app from that unfortunate circumstance. You have Grace Callwood, who was only 7 when she was diagnosed with stage 4 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and then at 8 years old is going through these surgeries and this chemo, and becoming a Make-A-Wish kid and saying, "Wow, I'm getting all this attention and all of these, whether it's donations or clothes or toys." I feel like other people can benefit from this as an 8-year-old thinking that. A lot of them, were pushed, not pushed, but sort of self-motivated it was just innately within them to lead. It just came out. And I think for me, I'm like fascinated by that because I'm like, what is it in you? And I'm fascinated with this Generation Z anyway, because they are the post 9/11 generation, the Barack Obama, Donald Trump generation, the school shooting generation. There was a 9-year-old girl I was talking to, and I said, we only had fire drills growing up. And she was like, what? She looked at me like I had two heads. Like, you don't have active shooter drills? You didn't have active shooter drills? And I'm like, no, I didn't have to. There were things, but that just wasn't. I can't imagine, growing up as a young, and now the pandemic. I mentioned everything, and so what in these girls, particularly young Black women, right, who are sort of on the intersection of their gender and their race, so they're already on the margins. What is it in them that, doesn't just sit back, that just automatically has this default mode? Because I don't know, if I was a teenager, I really just can't imagine. I was thinking about prom, and they think about prom and the pandemic, prom and a school shooting. They're having to juggle both of those consciousnesses, and that's I can't even imagine it. So I think it needs to be studied.
Absolutely, because the world in which they're growing up is so different. I mean, just the mere fact that you have the world right here in your hand.
Right, that too. Right.
Yeah, it's like I remember going to the library and checking out. I mean, I still do. Right. But that was the thing, or having an encyclopedia in the house, or whatever the case may be, which of course was only updated every year or so, so it wasn't current. So I mean, that's just the information and knowing things and seeing things on a continuous loop just really does change the way that they view the world. And I just find it so powerful that there are, and these are just the ones that were selected for the book. There are countless others, that are just out here, doing things and wanting to make change and see the world, as a better place. So Evelyn is saying she can't wait to read the book. Yes, it's really good.
I'm glad.
Yes. So now, how did you go about finding the girls to include? Because I'm sure there were lots of options.
Yeah. It's interesting because it was after Parable came out, the pandemic, like a month after Parable came out, the pandemic sort of exploded. So that was March 2020. I wasn't thinking about writing another book. Right. And I didn't want to be one of those people that was like, I'm going to write a book during the pandemic. I very much was like, I'm a bake and watch TV and hang out with my family, but then the sort of uprisings happened after the George Floyd tragedy. And you were seeing young people, not just on social media, but leading marches and, things like that. And I just was like, wow. And actually, it was around the George Floyd murder, but that was also right during their graduation, class of 2020.
Right.
Everybody was feeling like really bad for the, for the high schoolers and the college students, and just having to do virtual school and graduate with Barack Obama on TV. It was just weird. But they were leading through that. I was watching the sort of, they were at the forefront of the conversation. And so that's sort of how the book came about to an extent. But from there, I noticed certain ones. So I think Hannah's, I saw something with Hannah hosting a virtual prom, I think it was for hers, for her organization, and raising money for charities through this virtual prom. So some of these I stumbled on just in the internet. Right. Some of the girls, some I actually looked up. Amara, I was looking up, Black climate justice activists just in general. I just wanted to know, who was out there. And what is interesting, I was look at some of the white ones that are being centered and look at the organization, and on the organization's team, you would see like Amara showed up on an organization's team, something else. And so I just looked her up and was like, wow, she's doing some fascinating local work, Sonya, I already knew because she and I were connected in Jersey, and she actually interviewed me for Parable the Brown Girls book release party, and I just was fascinated with her. So some of them I was familiar with, and some of them I researched, and then some. Andrea Butler, who is the editor of Ceci magazine, she sent me some suggestions of girls that she'd covered. So that's sort of how I found them.
Okay. Yeah, because I mean, nowadays there's just so much out there and you could be overwhelmed with the information that's available. But going back to Amara, environmental justice, that really, I mean, several of the stories rang out to me, but hers just talking about what it means to be an environmental justice advocate, activist, as a Black person, because a lot of times the way things are set up,
right? Well, I learned so much from her. I mean, ours was a Zoom conversation, and the other girls, I learned from all of them, but like I felt like I was being taken to school for Amara because I don't have I don't have any experience in climate justice activists or environmental activism, however you want to say it. I just don't have any. And so I think when you're, and, like using Jay Shell as an example, she, just going back when she was talking about testifying and speaking, at the sort of like the State House in Rhode Island. And there were some things that she was talking about that I was like, can you clarify what you mean? So I didn't really, understand that. But Amara was from jump, really just teaching me about the intersection of sort of how she couldn't get away from racial, sort of like the racial implications of climate justice activism. They can't be separate, and when she mentioned Trayvon Martin, it was like a light bulb went off when she was talking about how that was an example of sort of environmental inequity. How you just walking out, how that was an outdoors thing. Right. And how, Black kids not being able to wear hoodies and outdoors, or sundown towns and things like that these are all matters of the environment, issues with the environment. I don't know why it just didn't cross my mind. And so she was like, that's environmental inequity and that needs to be addressed. That's a racial issue. It's not just, coal mine, even though there are, just sewage or just, just sort of like environmental issues in underserved communities that usually are Black and brown. She talked about that, but then something as like not being able to walk outside, at night because you're a Black person. They don't have access to the environment in ways that white people do. And so she was basically saying that white people, of course, would have more, not just access, but are more prone to be interested in environmental studies than Black people, but and Black and brown people. But she's saying that it's because of their access to the outdoors, because they don't have to think about wearing a hoodie, in the evening, because they're growing up in neighborhoods that are more affluent, that have more greenery, where they have access to the mountains or whatever. We don't. And man, she schooled me so much. I always talk about her in interviews because I was like, wow, that's really deep. And she's so passionate about it.
Right. And one thing, as I was reading that part and even listening to you, I'm a part of Girl Trek. I don't know if you're familiar with Girl Trek. And, prior to the pandemic, every year we would go out to girltrek.org, TREK.org, for those of you who aren't familiar with it. But every year we would go out to Colorado for something called a stress protest. And we would be in the mountains. And I mean, the first time I went, it was a smaller group of us. But then over the years, it grew and grew and grew. And it's like hundreds of Black women out in the mountains and hiking and doing all of these things. And that is something that, you really don't see a lot of. Obviously, it's not that we don't do it, but to be there and to, have other people looking at us like, what? They're kind of shocked because they're not expecting to see us there. We're out there doing archery, all kinds of stuff. They're not expecting to see us out there. Good. But it is the fact that, even the national parks You don't expect to see Black folks out in those spaces, but yet we still enjoy the outdoors. I mean,
right.
I almost said a cuss word. I mean, we helped to build these parks. You know, a lot of these things that other people are now taking advantage of, you know, we played a part in making them even available. So, but to yet feel like, oh, I shouldn't go there, or I'm going to be looked at, or maybe somebody's going to, you know, bother me because I'm there. So, yeah, absolutely. I mean, yes, it's the not being able to walk through your neighborhood or a mixed neighborhood or whatever safely. It's that, but just the whole thing of the outdoors in general. So yes.
Yeah, I took so with the Becoming conference, I did it for 2 years, 2017, then 2018, I believe it was. And we did it at Princeton Theological Seminary and then Rutgers. Then a friend of mine died, so I took a year off. And then after that, the pandemic. So last year I took a group of, I don't know if it was 20 girls or whatever. We had like a leadership retreat. And I was like, let's do a retreat. I have to have, you know, less people anyway because of COVID, you know, figuring that out. And so I took them to one of those like, you know, those camps, you know, they have the facilities with them. And we used to do it as a youth ministry back in the day, you know, and the girls were just not, you know, first off, we were the only Black girl group there, you know, like you said, and them just getting acclimated to that, you know, and me being like, let's take some time journaling outside and, you know, that whole thing. And just like Amara, her whole thing is she's like, I love outdoors so much. And I want Black people to love being outdoors too. I don't want Black people to tiptoe around outdoors, or it's like we've been indoctrinated to, you know, sort of like be hesitant when it comes to the outdoors. And she's like, no, you know, this is our ground, this is our land, you know. And I'm like, yeah. Now I wasn't necessarily diving into being outside, you know what I mean? Don't get me wrong, I'm not like that much of an outdoorsy person, but you know, just I lived in Southern California for a few years, and having grown up on the East Coast, mainly in New Jersey, going to school in Philly, you know, the idea of having access to like going on hikes and mountains and you know, those types of things just as your daily thing, that was such a big deal for me. But I just assumed, you know, chalked it up to it being a coastal thing, which I'm sure it was, but some part of it too, I think Amara made me reflect on, how much of this is also this, you know,
right,
way I've been conditioned.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. So I found her story quite powerful. One of the others, and we've already kind of talked about her a little bit, Hannah Lucas.
Yeah.
With the Not Okay app. Just give us a little bit about her story.
Yeah. So Hannah was sort of suffering with an illness that wasn't being diagnosed. You know, she was going back and forth to the doctors, and actually there was some overlap with her and Grace's interaction with the doctors. You know, them thinking, oh, she's just young girl, oh, she's just temperamental or whatever it might be. And it really was affecting her just ability to function. But as a result, she was depressed from that, but then also was being bullied in school and just feeling really socially outcast, and had a moment one evening where she decided to take a bunch of pills and to take her life. Her mother just happened by and literally in that moment, and was able to intervene and stop her. But Hannah, you know, says that in the moment where her mother sort of grabbed her, that she had a vision of herself pressing up, you know, using her thumb to press something. And in the subsequent days, she thought more about that and said, you know, maybe other people, you know, if I only had something to press. And she was talking about how, you know, we always have our phones and we have them out. And so she was thinking that, you know, maybe there would be something that you press that would alert people around you. Because what if her mom didn't come?
Right.
And so she connected with her brother, her younger brother, who just was, you know, a techie and And they just got together and they created something called the Not Okay app, where you press the a button on your phone if you're in a moment of despair, distress, and it sends a signal to 5 of your closest contacts that you choose, gives them your GPS signal, just lets them know I'm not okay. They call, they come to you, whatever it might be, and they created this app.
Like, wow.
Kids.
Right. That's why I'm like, wow. I mean, there's just so many levels to that. I mean, just the fact of she, dealing with the way that we aren't always taken seriously when we have a medical issue, that people brush things off and not think that, what we're saying is true, that we have this higher pain tolerance, or, all these things that they say about us. That, and then, to think that even in the midst of her pain and it being rescued, that she immediately had this vision and thought of others. And I love the way, from the leadership perspective, you tied in Harriet Tubman, who had
her divine visions. Obviously not in the same way, but I felt
absolutely.
Visionary leadership. Harriet Tubman very much led from I saw it, it's gonna happen, so I'm doing it. I mean, that's sort of what I got from her. I think, our history books would say, oh, she led the Underground Railroad and sort of that's it. But I feel like they're leaving things out when they fail to mention that she's like, I saw emancipation a few years before it took place, or I saw us being free. I saw me, that. And then I went after it after I saw it. That is visionary leadership.
Absolutely. So yes, that really resonated with me, and just the fact of now she's created something, her and her brother have created something that's helping, has the potential to help so many people who are going through things. Because a lot of us, specifically as Black women, there's this whole thing of us being strong Black women, and we're supposed to have it all together. We're not, never let them see you sweat, all of these things. But the reality of it is, and we saw it not too long ago with Miss USA, who died by suicide, that just because things look a certain way or you may appear to be a certain way, that doesn't mean that you're not struggling, you're not going through things. So I think it's quite powerful that someone who found themselves in that situation had the heart to create something that's going to help, thousands of people.
Yeah. And I also, find it fascinating that as it was sort of being developed and Charlie was, her brother, was really focusing on that part, she was going to therapy. She was, dealing with her own mental health. And she's very clear about sort of saying that I didn't just dive into into the app. I took some time for myself as well. And I was just fascinated with that. And she continues to. I mean, there are girls in the book that are now like, what press are we doing? What are we doing? Are we going on a talk show? Like, they're very sort of in it. And then there are other girls that are like, I just got so much going on. I'm so glad about this book. I just need to take some time, and they're still teaching me. I will say that continues to teach.
And that is something, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's something that I thought about. Because of course, some of them are grown or close to it now, as they remind you. But just thinking of the fact of being like a young person who is dealing with, the changes in your body, in the case of some of the young girls, they're dealing with, bullying, they're dealing with society, they're dealing with health issues. There's so many things, trying to get their education, all these different things. Yeah. But I did, pick up in several of the stories that they are mindful of their health, whether it's their physical health or their mental health, understanding that, that's important as well.
Yeah. There's Jay Shell, who I mentioned, I had a Instagram live conversation with on Sunday. She joked, well, I don't know if she was joking, but it was funny to me. So she was talking about how she was like, well, I was, getting ready to run for Rhode Island Senate, and I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. She's like, we had campaign posters, and we were all getting ready to do it. And then she was like, well, I don't know. I guess I just want to go to college. Like she's getting ready. She's a senior in high school and she's getting ready to go to college. And she was like, I think I just want to focus on college. And I was like, you think?
Right.
That's a good idea, but so she was talking about now she's got this real interesting in wrestling. And she's like, I'm going to take my racial justice activism in whatever realm that I do. She's like, that's just going to happen. I still want to run for politics, all that. But she's like, I just love wrestling. And so she's doing this wrestling while white hashtag, something she's got.
Wow.
Wrestling now. And I'm just like, I just love these girls because they're just like evolving, like they don't have to stay who they were when I wrote about them, even though there's still those elements. But I love that this generation does have the language of self-care and, then in ways that I didn't even know what self-care was. It wasn't a phrase that was going around when I was younger. And so not only is it something that they can articulate, but they really take it very seriously. And so I've just really applied. I'm wrestling. And then Tia, who was in March for Our Lives, she's crocheting, her whole. I'm like, so we're going to tag you, Tia. I'm like, I'm tagging you when we, just get your page together. She's like, oh, okay. It's all crochet.
But that's okay. Wow. I mean, that's that balance. I mean, really, that's what Live Well Sister is about. I mean, yes, you can be this. What prompted me to start it was I think of all of the women that, for years, Brown Girl Collective has been around for almost 13 years. And I've been sharing lots of stories about Black women that are doing all these wonderful, powerful things. But then I think of sometimes you can be this great go-getter, this politician, this artist, this whatever it is that you are. And sometimes your life is a shambles. So, living well is about, okay, yeah, you can do that, but let's see what ways in which we can tap into making sure our spirit is right, our health is right, our relationships are healthy, that we're walking in our purpose, being the best that we can be, serving our community, having fun, how can we do all of these things? And yeah, you can't do all of them at once. Sometimes one thing is going to take precedence over the other. But it's not that we don't, recognize that we need to have more balance and not feel like as Black women that we have to work ourselves to death. I know you mentioned her in the book, but I also thought of Fannie Lou Hamer, how all the health issues that she had, she was doing all these wonderful things, but then left here too early because of her health.
Yeah. It's what I find interesting about the girls is that they sort of, as an adult, I have to constantly remind myself of the things that you were just, saying. Whereas I feel like these girls, they do remind, but it comes naturally. They're not even second guessing it, which I'm proud of. And I feel like we are doing our work in sort of as the generation, that are before them of setting that tone, because I feel like it's being passed down very naturally. Because to say, hey, there's a book coming up about you and you're going to be at the center and all that. And they're like, okay. Crocheting, and I'm like, it's such a lesson to me, but it's also so freeing because I'm like, she was out there doing March for Our Lives. And what's crazy is like, why should she continue to be doing all that right now? She was, a part of the school that was the sort of students that were the victims of the Parkland school shooting. To go so hard after that, to be a part of that movement, she needs a break.
Absolutely.
And she's in Stanford now, and I'm like, I was in the beginning like, oh man, I want people to go to her page and I'm going to tag her and she's going to have all her speaking up there. And it's like, you want to buy some hats?
Nothing wrong with that, though.
No.
And it also just speaks to the fact that we are multifaceted. We can be multi-passionate. Two things can be true at the same time.
Yeah. I with my publishing company, we before all this sort of started, right when the book was starting to be marketed, we met with pretty much all the girls on a call. And I told the girls, I said, just what you just said, do what you're doing right now. Like who you were a few years ago, that's the whole idea. Like the girls in Parable were anonymous. So my 9-year-old that I wrote about in chapter 1, she's going to stay 9 forever because that's how she is in the book. Whereas you all 14, 15, 16, or 22, now 23, we need to see that you have evolved. So don't feel the pressure to change. If you want to, polish up your pages and get yourself together and go on tours or speaking tours, whatever it is you want to do using the book, you can. But if you just want to be wrestling in senior year and about to go to prom, do that because people need to see that Black women and girls are multifaceted, that we don't have to be performative at all times.
Right.
And that we can just live our lives the way that we want to in the seasons that we're called to do so.
Absolutely. That's so important. That is so important. And, also realizing that, we're multifaceted. And sometimes, that thing that you used to do, you just may not want to do that anymore.
Right. That's it. And that's just what happens,
Right.
I used to write plays back in the day. And I remember wrote and directed 7 plays. And that was like who I was.
Okay.
And some people will, from that knew me back when, you're not writing plays anymore. And I'm like, all right, I used to write plays. Like we just evolve. That's who we are. All human beings can do it, but Black women and girls in particular need the permission. Don't need the permission, right? Like we need to be able to give ourselves the permission to do that unapologetically.
Absolutely. Let me see. I just want to talk about Kennedy a little bit because she's from my hometown.
Well, Ken, you can have her on your show because she's one of the ones that's like, are we going to be on TV? Because I'm going to be.
Okay. I need to look her up. Yeah. That's my home girl.
Oh, yeah. She's great. Kennedy, so she now is at Columbia. Kennedy was, I was calling her more of sort of an arts advocate for the arts. Mm-hmm. Although she's a young woman of many, many talents. Right. And so in Cleveland, she was starting arts, iArt Cleveland. So she's a violinist. She's a classically trained violinist, but also considers herself a gospel violinist.
Okay.
But she just really has a real passion for just the arts in general. Then she started a sort of a series called Chat Her Talks, having conversations with different artists about their creativity and what they do. But her violin skills, for the most part, is sort of her segue into that arts world. She's also highly intelligent. Okay. And they all very, very smart, and she's very, very book smart. They're all really smart though. I can't really say that, but she is. And so, her thing is just, I call her the pace setting leader because she's so smart, because she has all these different gifts and talents, and she's artistic, and she's, knows math and science and all of this, that sort of her leadership, the way that she focuses is just to go like at her own pace, to not necessarily go sort of full speed ahead. She talks about Anne Lamont's book, Bird by Bird, and she talks about taking things like sort of one bite at a time, what she calls bird by bird. So I very much enjoy her. But again, she's at Columbia now. I'm not sure what she's majoring in, but she's like what do you call it? Dreamers? She's an alumni of Disney Dreamers. She's on Oprah something now because I just saw her.
Wow.
Yeah, she was something with Oprah. She was on a Zoom call, some sort of scholar. She's a Coca-Cola scholar. She's got all these scholarships. I mean, you name it. Okay. She's not paying a dime to go to Columbia.
Well, that's good for her. Well, good to my home girl. I don't live there now, but that's where I was born and raised. So I'm was in the house. And we have a comment actually from over on YouTube.
Hi, Elise.
Yes, I agree that we need to evolve. Thank you, Elise. I hope I said that correctly.
Yes, I've known Elise since college. I didn't know you were.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for joining us. But yes, we definitely need to evolve, and just listening to your story personally, Khristi. I mean, I see that you have evolved and done different things, and this is where you are now. But later on, it could be something different. Myself personally, I have been evolving. What I'm doing now through this platform is not what I went to school for. It's not what I was trained in, but it's something that when I was a little girl growing up in Cleveland, that I used to read Essence magazine, and at the time I said, well, where is the Essence for young Black girls, which there wasn't. We had teen and 17 back then. Yeah, I'm kind of telling my age, but yeah, those are the magazines that I looked to, but it wasn't anything that really featured Black girls. I think Whitney Houston showed up as a model a few times back in those days. That was about the extent of it. So I always had it in the back of my mind, and life took me in different directions. And then it said about 13 years ago, I started Brown Girl Collective, and in the last couple of years started, doing things like this, in this format. So it's I always wanted to, because I always knew that we were special, and I always knew that there needed to be multiple avenues for our stories to be told. Yeah, that's one thing. Essence is wonderful, but there are other stories to be told. Essence can't include everybody.
Right. Which is why I'm so glad that now we have this access to technology in ways that we can have, like a conversation. Like now we don't have to wait till or try to get into Essence per se. We can have this through your platform. So
absolutely. So that's a wonderful thing. So of course, as I mentioned earlier, the book technically doesn't come out for another month.
It comes out March. Yeah, a month. Yes, it's February 10th. So it comes out March 8th. The adult book comes out March 8th, and then the middle grade book comes out March 22nd.
Okay. So what is the difference between, obviously reading level and stuff like that, but what is the main difference between the two books for, those aunts or moms or educators or whoever who might want the middle grades book?
Well, I'm going to pull up a middle grade.
All right.
So you can see. So just aesthetically, for starters, this is the advanced reader copy. So it's glossy, looks very different, but this will be a hardcover book.
Okay.
It's obviously thinner. It's for 6th to 8th grade girls, so the read is different. So it's the same content. It's just down a bit. And then you can also see, for example, in the adult book, I would also say, high school girls, of course, can read this. But when you're looking at, we do have the pictures in the book, not all throughout, but of each girl before each chapter. But it's more like a wordy, content book. Whereas this book, you'll see the same girl here. I think the chapters are sort of out. I wanted to show you the same girl. Hold on. So that's the same girl that I just showed you. And so they're illustrated. It's illustrated different. Okay. And inside the book, you'll have these these little sections that are really cute. Brown kids read. So it's much more visual. And then at the end of each chapter, this is Tia's chapter, has the girls. So the wisdom that I write about in the chapters is sort of not watered down, but it's narrowed down much more. So you get some actual you get to see, I write a whole thing in the adult book about transformational leadership.
Right.
It's very academic, whereas here it's just this little blurb about transformational leadership, sort of an overview for the girls. So it definitely is much, much, much more of a visual book.
I'm gonna have to get that one too.
Introduction. So I think they did a really great job of sort of the illustrations in this book, which is good. Actually,
because go ahead.
I think Publishers Weekly sent some arcs out to some random people, I guess, and so somebody put on Goodreads. They got the arc of this, the e-arc, and they had said, "This is really great. I'm glad there's representation or whatever. I wish there was an older version." The woman had no idea that there was an older version. So yeah.
Well, I will have to get that because, you can see, I always have to remember which side I'm pointing at. Over here, this is just one of two bookshelves, just like it. And then I have books. I would never show you what
right.
Because I have books everywhere, on every table, in every room, because I love to read. But one thing I do, even as an adult, I love to read, young adult, middle grades, children's books, especially because when I was coming up, we didn't have stuff that looked like this with us in it. Didn't. So, I like to go back and kind of speak to that girl within me, that little brown girl within me, by reading those stories and, just seeing myself in that way. So, I definitely suggest, even if you're an adult, go ahead and pick it up. Both of them, get both of them, support. Get both of them, pre-order both of them, and definitely get them to share with the young people in your life. So, of course, we know this is just kicking off. We're getting started, so you're going to be on a book tour for a while, or a virtual book tour. Tell us a little bit about what's ahead in the next month or so, or ways that we can look out for you.
Yeah. Well, definitely come on over to my Instagram page, because I am every Sunday doing an Instagram live with one of the girls in the book. So this Sunday I'm doing an Instagram live with Grace, and just catching up with them, seeing, how they're doing, and, if they recognize the person that was written about in the book. Some of them were like, wow, that's me, or I've evolved, I've changed, that's no longer me. So I want people to meet the girls as much as possible. And that is like really, such a great opportunity, the one-on-one opportunities. So I will be doing some virtual book talks with like books and crannies. I'm doing a virtual book talk. But I'm also doing something with Cafe Con Libros in Brooklyn, in person, actually, in March, God willing, of course. And I'm visiting like a high school in Brooklyn, and visiting some girls, a classroom that's doing a classroom project around Unbossed. So it's just going to be sort of a mix, but I post them all on my Twitter, and my Instagram, so people sort of can have an idea. All right, now my dog's trying to lean on the computer, and I don't want her to.
Oh, no, we're just about done. Yes, if you want to. Okay. Enough is enough. I told you earlier, my Monday night interview, the dog just sat in her lap, and all the whole time, and he waved at us at the edge.
Her whole chin just went across the keyboard, like, all right.
Enough already. It's late. I'm ready to go. But yes, of course, if you look at the bottom, all of Khristi's information has been scrolling. So there's her Instagram, her Twitter, her Facebook, as well as her website. So please, go. It's very important for us to support our Black women writers. And if you can pre-order, that's even more so, because that just shows the publishers and everyone that people are interested in the story, and there could be a second, third, fourth, more editions, sell more books and more books and more books, to get these stories out there, because I do think that it's important for us to learn our history, to know what's going on with us now, but then also to be able to see into the future, and what's ahead, and because a lot of times when you're an older person, you have all these ideas, oh, the young people aren't this, the young people aren't that, but that's not always true. So we need to know that and celebrate these stories. So Khristi, once again, I thank you so much for your time. Thank you. I've appreciated having the opportunity to talk to you. And of course, I know right now you're focused on this. You have another book coming in the future. Please let us know.
Oh, I will. There's something already I'm getting ready to pitch, but
usually that's the way it is.
Staying in the Black girl realm.
Right.
If I did, even though I will, I would love to venture and write about but I felt like for my third one, I'm like, I need to. The argument that I tried to make when I pitched, because Parable was rejected for the first publishing company.
Oh, wow.
And I always tell that story because one of the reasons it wasn't all out rejected, it was asked to revise it so that it could reach all girls, a wide audience, because they felt like the demographic of Black girls was too narrow. And I was like, what? So that sort of lit a fire under me. Parable of Brown Girl.
This is it if you were showing it earlier. Parable.
And if you see this is an ode to Parable of the Brown Girl, the cover. It's
Oh
very
yeah, sure is. Sure is.
and but the but the point I trying to make is that I was saying, there's a plethora of topics and things that we cannot run out of things to talk. They're not too narrow of a demographic. So I felt like if I wrote a third one, I want to push that message that, oh, I don't have to stop. We can write about Black girls, and there's so much that we can learn from them. It doesn't have to stop at leadership or even theology.
Right. Absolutely, because I mean, as we've already said, we are very multifaceted. There are just
Yeah.
so many pieces, parts to who we are, and it's good to be able to, get those. Because I think about this a lot of times. Like you say, you used to write plays.
Mhm.
Um, I think of like television or movies or whatever. They want to put us in certain boxes, or
Mm.
it's like, but others get to tell whatever stories they want to
Mhm.
tell,
Mhm.
good, bad, in between, funny, horror flick, whatever it is. But when
Right.
it's us, it's like we're expected to stay in a certain vein,
Yeah.
very narrow vein. So I appreciate, the fact that you are holding fast to what you believe in and putting it out there for those of us to enjoy. So now this is one of my people who's always here, Paula. So thank you for a wonderful discussion. I love the freedom that our younger Black females feel, being empowered and not having to be apologetic for their decisions. Absolutely.
Amen. Mhm.
Absolutely. So, everybody, thank you so much for joining us on Khristi. To you, especially,
Thank
specifically,
you.
thank you. I wish you much success, you and the girls, whatever directions they decide to go.
Yeah.
I wish
Right.
everyone continued success, continue to, evolve and grow and be all that they can be. And same for you. And same for
Thank you.
those of you who are watching. We
Yeah.
all of us. So, everyone, I look to see you next week. I'm still firming up my guests for next week. So normally I would announce them. I'm not announcing just yet, but that will come up here within the next couple of days. I'll let you know for next Thursday. And of course, BGC Book Club will be here on Monday. So, stay tuned to all that we have going on here. And I look forward to seeing you all again soon. Take care. Happy Valentine's Day in case I don't see you before then. And everybody continue to live well. Thank you so much. All right. Bye bye. Chrissy, you can stay there for a second.
Okay. Come on.